Terrific. Let's get started. So hi, everyone. My name is Manju Bangalore. I am an organizer here at the PCCC, the Bold Progressive. Before we get started, I just want to thank everyone for joining, and I want to give a few quick programmatic notes before we dive in. So for those who haven't yet, if you're comfortable with it, please go ahead and turn your videos on so we can feel like we're in a room together. We'll hear from the congressman about his journey, the investigation, and his new book, and then take some questions from the audience. So to ask a question, please submit it in the chat with your hometown and state, and we will call on you during the Q&A portion. And please feel free to send your questions at any point. Also be on the lookout for a direct message from Nick at PCCC in the chat if you're selected, and we will request to unmute you so you can ask your question. And to be sensitive of the congressman's time, we won't have time to get to every question, but we will get to as many as we can. We ask everyone to keep your question between 10 and 20 seconds so we can get to as many great questions as possible. We also hope you'll consider buying the congressman's new book, Unthinkable, Trauma, Truth, and the Trials of American Democracy. In it, he tells the story of the 45 days at the start of 2021 that permanently changed his life and his family as he confronted the painful loss of his son to suicide, lived through the violent insurrection at the Capitol, and led the impeachment effort to hold President Trump accountable for inciting the political violence. We also want Congressman Raskin to be able to focus on investigating Trump instead of fundraising for his reelection. So please consider donating to his reelection campaign. We'll make it super easy and drop the donate and book order link in the chat a few times throughout this event. With that, let me turn it over to PCCC co-founder, Dr. Stephanie Taylor.
Thank you, Manju, and thank you to the others on the PTRIP team who've worked so hard to put this event together. Thank you to so many PTRIP members joining us tonight for this special event. And thank you to our good friend, Congressman Jamie Raskin. We were proud to endorse Jamie when he first ran for Congress in 2016, when he ran against a millionaire self-funder. Jamie won that race because he's an organizer at heart and because he has a lifetime of challenging the powerful on behalf of the people. And we see those same qualities shining through again as he fights for accountability after January 6th. His new book details how he dealt with both the loss of his beloved son, Tommy, and the events of January 6th within days of each other, and then went on to lead a historic impeachment prosecution. We are so honored to have Jamie Raskin, a true American hero, with us today. And now my co-founder, Adam Green, will say a few more words and introduce the congressman.
Great, thanks, Stephanie. I remember hearing about Tommy Raskin's passing on December 31st, 2020, and my heart dropped as I thought about our friend Jamie and our friend Sarah Bloom Raskin. And I remember seeing Jamie on the House floor a week later on January 6th, before the insurrection, as he was citing the Constitution and making the case for counting votes that reflect the will of the people. And I just admired the strength of this wonderful human and progressive leader at the time. And like many of you, I remember watching Jamie Raskin prosecute the impeachment case against former President Trump, thinking about all of the preparation and the grief that must have been part of the several weeks before that trial, and marveling at how lucky we are as Americans to have such an eloquent constitutional scholar and communicator and public leader who's able to represent the people so well at this moment. I would say that if there's one American today who could have been one of the founders and who would have been followed into intellectual battle by Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton and many others, it is clearly Jamie Raskin. And so when we saw each other a couple months ago and he told me about his forthcoming book, I talked to Stephanie about it and talked to our team about it. And it was a no-brainer to do everything we could to connect him with our members across the country and ensure that his important story and observations were heard by as many people as possible. And it's happening at a time when our democracy is under attack on so many fronts, as we saw today. So we're gratified that about 500 people are on this Zoom right now. We believe that about a couple thousand more will be watching this Facebook stream over the next 30 minutes live. And we actually have reporters here from the New York Times and Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, the Young Turks, and others listening in. This is not a campaign event. But as Stephanie alluded to, PCCC members have been there with Jamie since the beginning and have made over 15,000 donations totaling over $63,000 to his various campaigns for Congress. So tonight, in addition to posting links in the chat where you can order his book and order the audio book, we're going to post a campaign donate link for one reason, and that is that the less Jamie Raskin has to worry about campaign fundraising, the more he can focus on doing Americans proud in this investigation. So Jamie, thanks so much for being here. We would love to hear any thoughts you have to say to kick off this conversation, and then we'll take some questions. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you, my dear Adam. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you to all my wonderful friends at PCCC. You guys are close to my heart, as you know. And thank you just for being in the front lines of the struggle to defend American democracy against the right-wing authoritarianism that has overtaken the GOP under the thumb of Donald Trump. You know, rather than try to rehearse and restate for you everything that's in my book, I thought I would just mention a few different themes about it, and then we can open it up for questions, because I'm very eager to hear from everybody. And I want to thank all that whole great PCCC nation out there for all of your messages and your emails and all of your kindness and love. Okay, so look, let me start with this. On a day when there appears to be one significant law enforcement breakthrough, which is the arrest and the impending prosecution of Stuart Rhodes, who is the head of the Oath Keepers. I want to give you my sense of what took place on January 6th, which was a complicated day, and it takes some focus and some microscopic attention to figure out everything that was happening. But I encourage people who are just getting into it to think about the events of the day in terms of three rings of activity. And the outer ring was a mass demonstration called by President Trump for a wild protest through the social media. And there were weeks of recruitment of getting Trump supporters to come to Washington. And undoubtedly, the motivations with which they arrived ran the gamut, from those who were spoiling for a fight to those who didn't know what to expect, to those who thought it might even be just an innocent, nonviolent demonstration. But that third ring of the mass demonstration turned into a riot through the careful cultivation and coaching of a number of different figures who were there. And that riot ended up resulting in injuries and the wounding of 150 officers, in addition to several deaths. But there were cops there from the Capitol Police Department, from the Metropolitan Police Department in DC, more than 50 cops who came from Montgomery County, which is a jurisdiction that I represent in the House. There were cops there from Virginia, but there were 150 who ended up with broken noses, broken jaws, broken necks, broken vertebrae, broken arms, broken legs, traumatic brain injuries, fractured skulls, gouged eyes, post-traumatic stress syndrome. I have constituents who are officers who are still in physical therapy and mental therapy to this day, resulting from injuries that were inflicted more than a year ago. Okay, so this was the outer ring of the action. The middle ring of the action was the ring of the insurrection. And here we found the Oath Keepers, the Three Percenters, the Proud Boys, the Aryan Nations, members of the Unification Church, members of the First Amendment, Praetorian, the state militia groups, of course, not official state militias, but the self-declared militia groups, the QAnon networks that had mobilized, and so on. This was the realm of the domestic violent extremists who were training for battle. Many of them engaged in paramilitary training, arriving in Washington ready to break our windows, to knock down our doors, to open up pathways for entrance so they could get in, lead the crowd in as a violent mob, riot, and shut down the peaceful transfer of power, interfering with the counting of electoral college votes by Congress in joint session under the 12th Amendment. For the first time in U.S. history, it had never happened before that there was a violent entrance to the Capitol and an interference with the joint session called for in the 12th Amendment for the first week of January on that Wednesday. Okay, this realm of the intersection of the insurrection took a hit today with the arrest of Stuart Rhodes. And the story is about to be told, apparently, by law enforcement, although we're not working directly with them in any way. The select committee is on its own investigation, but we are finding all kinds of coordinated operations taking place within the ring of the insurrection. But believe it or not, this is not even the scariest ring of activity. The scariest ring is the very inner ring, the ring of the coup, which I know is an unusual word to drop into the American political parlance, because we're not used to coups in American history. We're not accustomed to political coups, and we think of coups as something that take place against a president. But this was a coup organized by the president and orchestrated against the vice president and against the Congress of the United States. Now, we know that Donald Trump was expecting to lose the election. He knew exactly where the polls were. He's addicted to public opinion polls. He knew exactly where everything was going. So he began months before the election trying to undermine the legitimacy and the integrity of the election and to cast all kinds of aspersions about it. And then immediately after the election took place, which resulted in 360 electoral college votes for Joe Biden, by the way, which is a margin that Trump had won by in 2016, which he had pronounced a landslide. When that took place, then Trump accelerated and intensified the effort to bring the election into disrepute and to claim that the whole thing was a fraud, a scam, and so on. And then he began formal efforts and then lawless efforts to overthrow the election result. The formal and lawful efforts were bringing 61 different lawsuits in federal and state court to try to overturn election results on the grounds that there had been election fraud and corruption. And he lost every single one of them. And so this was a major mistake on his part, because we have this meticulous nationwide documentary refutation of the assertion that there was some kind of fraud, that there was any kind of foul play. Even 8 Trump-appointed judges rejected everything that Donald Trump was saying. He didn't win in a single case on any claim of electoral fraud or corruption. So we've got a definitive documentary juridical record of the emptiness of all of his arguments about fraud taking place. But then that wasn't sufficient, of course. He went to GOP-controlled legislatures in states like Pennsylvania, like Wisconsin, to try to convince them simply to void the popular election result, to nullify them on the grounds of these discredited claims of election fraud and corruption, but replace them with the appointment of Trump electors. And there he was proceeding based on some suggestions, some intimations by the majority in Bush versus Gore that a state legislature at any time could set aside an election and simply appoint electors. And this is what he tried to get them to do. But even these GOP state legislative leaders refused to do it, saying that that had no legitimacy and they could not go along with it. At that point, he pursued the parallel effort simply to try to intimidate state election officials, more than 30 of them that we could count, most prominently Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger in Georgia, in order to get them to nullify popular election results and to find more votes for Trump. In the case of Georgia, we have a recorded phone conversation of Trump urging Secretary of State Raffensperger just to find 11,781 votes. That's all he wanted in order to stop the steal. Donald Trump was on a campaign not to stop election fraud. He was on a campaign to commit election fraud. What was that if not solicitation to commit election fraud? And certainly that's what it was. And to his great credit, Secretary of State Raffensperger, another unsung hero of 2020, refused to do it. So then all of the energy was focused on Mike Pence. All they needed to do, according to John Eastman's memo, all they needed to do, according to the Green Bay sweep. All they needed to do was to get Mike Pence to assert unilateral, lawless, extra-constitutional powers to nullify electoral college votes, to reject and return and repudiate electors coming in from Arizona, Georgia, Pennsylvania, and perhaps also Wisconsin and a handful of other states, swing states where there were relatively closer margins. We're still talking about like 80,000 votes in Pennsylvania, but they thought that if they could throw up a smokescreen of propaganda and disinformation, it would be enough for Pence just to reject those electors. Why? Well, if they could take Joe Biden's electoral college vote total from 306 to below 270, at that point, under the 12th Amendment, the contest would be thrown immediately into the House of Representatives. And why would Trump want Speaker Pelosi's Democratic-controlled House of Representatives to decide the election? Well, under the 12th Amendment, we don't cast our votes one member, one vote. We cast our votes one state, one vote. And after the 2020 elections, they controlled 27 states. We, the Democrats, had 22 state delegations, and one, Pennsylvania, was split down the middle. So even if the distinguished at-large representative from Wyoming, Liz Cheney, refused to join them in this fraud, still they would have had 26 states casting their votes immediately for Donald Trump. And that was the entire trajectory of this coup, to falsely destroy Joe Biden's majority in the Electoral College, kick it into the contingent election, where they would immediately, run it like the Republican convention, have Donald Trump declared the winner, and at that point, he would likely have, and more evidence is needed of this, but he likely would have followed the strong recommendation of his discredited former National Security Advisor, Michael Flynn, and invoke the Insurrection Act, and at that point, declare something like martial law, call in the National Guard to put down all of the chaos and insurrectionary violence that he had incited against us. And he would have declared himself the hero. Nancy Pelosi couldn't control it, but he would control it. He would have seized the presidency for another 4 years, and he would have been the hero to put down all of the chaos and the violence. That's what they had in store for us in that very inner core. So we are trying to put together the best, most comprehensive, meticulous analysis of what was taking place out in the mass demonstration that turned into a mob riot, the insurrectionary extremist organizing that turned into the smashing of the Capitol and laying siege to the Congress of the United States, and then to the inner core of the attempt to effectuate a coup against the vice president and the U.S. government. Now, Mike Pence, of course, was on that day, however sycophantic and obsequious and spineless he has been for the other 4 years of that administration, on that day, he earned his salary. He was a constitutional patriot, to my mind. He refused to buckle under to Donald Trump and to Michael Flynn and to Steve Bannon and to Rudy Giuliani and the gang. He refused to do it. And we saw the mob chanting, "Hang Mike Pence, hang Mike Pence." You saw the gallows that they set up outside of the Capitol with a noose. When they said, "Hang Mike Pence," they weren't kidding around. They weren't speaking metaphorically. If you look at some of the stuff that Stuart Rhodes was saying, he said, this is civil war. And this goes way beyond Donald Trump at this point. All he's doing is whining and complaining and riling people up. But Rhodes said, we're going to act on it. So everybody understands how Donald Trump exploited that middle tier of the insurrectionists. They used him too. Back in Charlottesville in August of 2017, the Unite the Right rally could only gather 500 people together. Now they had thousands of these extremists as the vanguard stormtroopers of a march of 40 or 50,000 people coming to overthrow the workings of American democracy. And they were proud of it. And if you look at the postings on all of the extremist websites, they considered it a huge victory, just like Donald Trump did. Never forget this day, he told them. I love you. Never forget this day. We love you. And so they've not forgotten it. And if you look at what they're saying now, all of them are saying, and the next time we're not leaving our firearms in the cars, in the hotels, and the motels. We're bringing them with us. And the political scientists will tell you that the surefire indicator of a successful coup coming is a recently failed coup where people remain at large and they're able to plot the next time, filling in the inadequacies of their first efforts, having learned from it and having been able to identify the weaknesses of the current regime. So we're very much in this struggle to defend democratic institutions, both physically, our windows, our doors, the buildings of the Capitol, but also electorally and within the architecture of American constitutional democracy. So that's what we got to do. Now, that's kind of the middle part of my book. The first part of my book, as I think you mentioned, Adam or Stephanie did, is about my beloved son, Tommy, who we lost on the last day of 2020, and what his dreams were and what his moral and political passions were all about. And I mean, it's obviously the worst thing that ever happened to me in my life and in the life of my family and Tommy's sisters, Hannah and Tabitha, and all the cousins, and Sarah, and all of us. It was a nightmare, and it continues to be a nightmare to live without Tommy. But we're able to talk about him now without breaking down and dissolving completely. And I want to say that I learned something about trauma, about private trauma and about public trauma, since there was this extraordinary disharmonic convergence of these two traumas in our lives. But, you know, trauma, as I say in the book, can steal every joy from your life and laughter from your life and happiness from your life. And it can extinguish what is most beloved and most precious to you and leave you completely bereft and destitute. But I want to say that there's this other side to it. And, you know, I asked my friend, Norman Sandridge, who's a professor of classics at Howard, is there a Greek god of trauma? And he told me no. And so we decided to imagine a Greek god of trauma who came to us something like Janus, the two-faced god who looks both to the past and the future at the same time. And the god of trauma can cheat you out of everything that you love. But then, paradoxically, trauma can forge new bonds for you to humanity and to other people, much deeper than you ever understood before, and give you a much greater sense of human experience. It allows you to touch other people's tragedy and other people's misfortune in a way you never could before, and so give you a much greater sense of what humanity means and what the human experience is. And I imagine talking to the god of trauma and saying, well, that's interesting that you have these two sides, but I don't think it's a fair deal, so I'd rather not accept it. But that's the catch. It's not up to you. Trauma comes to you. So you can decide to accept that other forward-looking part of it or not. But the first part, you've just got. You know, that is part of what it means to be human. So the end of my book is about, you know, about the impeachment trial in the Senate and everything that we went through. And if anybody's got any questions about that, I'm happy to talk about it. I will say, you know, I was quite crestfallen and crushed when the votes were taken, and we got only 57 votes, 57 to 43. It doesn't sound like much of a defeat, but it was a defeat because we needed 67 votes to convict Donald Trump, so he beat the constitutional spread. On the other hand, there have only been 4 Senate presidential impeachment trials in U.S. history. There was Andrew Johnson, there was Bill Clinton, and that was ridiculous. There was Trump 1 and there was Trump 2, and this was by far the most sweeping bipartisan Senate presidential impeachment vote in U.S. history. So that was successful. I do think that we convicted him in the court of public opinion. I do think we convicted him in the eyes of history. I do believe that he has been absolutely discredited as a national political figure. However, he has only consolidated and tightened his control over the Republican Party, which now operates not like a modern political party that tries to bring in different groups, that has an agenda and a forward-looking project. No, all that's gone. 2020 was a remarkable year for a lot of reasons. One of them was that it was the first time in modern political history that one of the major political parties did not adopt a platform at its convention. And they did not, which tells you everything you need to know. What is their platform? Whatever Donald Trump says on any particular day, that's their platform. Whatever he says, and he can change his mind, and they follow. They're operating not like a modern political party. They're operating like a mass religious and political cult headed by a quasi-organized crime family. That's essentially what it is. And so that's a dangerous thing. They've positioned themselves outside of the constitutional order. They attack our constitutional processes. They attack our political institutions, and they reject the outcome of our elections. And you could say that is the leading duty of a political party in a constitutional democracy, to accept elections that they lose as well as elections that they win. And as President Biden said the other night, they reject it completely. So we lost an election down in Virginia. I didn't like that. You guys didn't like that. We didn't storm the Virginia state capitol and beat up a lot of police officers. We said, okay, we got outmaneuvered by some of the lies and propaganda of the Republican Party. What are we going to do to address that? How are we going to do better next time? That's all. But we didn't go get people killed. We didn't go beat people up. So with that, let me just say, yeah, I told you it was a mistake, Adam, to tell me to talk about my book. I just want to say we're in the fight of our lives, my friends. We really are. And democracy is in peril in the United States of America. All that stuff that you grew up with in high school about American exceptionalism and it can't happen here, forget all that. It almost happened here on January 6th. It did at every level. So we're in the fight of our lives to defend democratic institutions and values with everything we've got. With that, I yield back.
Thank you so much, Congressman. That was really, really impactful. And we have time for a question or two. So I'm going to go to Diane Kupilian from Bethesda. We're going to go ahead and request to unmute and spotlight. We'll just give it
I think I'm unmuted. Congressman Raskin, what is the best thing that we as citizens can do to support you and our constitutional democracy?
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, you know, they have very simple marching orders, which is do whatever Donald Trump tells you to do on a particular day. We're trying to defend democracy, which is not one thing, but it's a whole collection of institutions. It's the free press, it's Congress, it's democracy at the state and county and local level, it's real education, it is defending science. So we've got to defend all of our democratic institutions, and everybody is going to be able to find, you know, exactly what your position is in this struggle. If you want to help me, I've converted my campaign into two things, basically going out and helping other Democrats in other parts of the country in their races, and then into the Project Democracy Summer, which is educating high school and college age kids on the history of democratic struggle and the civilizing movements of our days, and then how they can be involved, how they can go out and register people to vote and conduct canvasses and do online petitions and do digital organizing and so on. So we are now hoping that we're going to have more than 1,000 Democracy Summer Fellows, high school and college age kids coming to participate with us. You can help us spread the word. You can contribute to Democracy Summer, and you can help us to build Democracy Summer in your community. But we're trying to go all over the country, and we're long past the days when we can abandon anybody. We've got to be defending democracy and democratic institutions and the Democratic Party in every state, county, and locality in the country. And by the way, right now, these days, I follow Franklin D. Roosevelt. I call our party the Democracy because we are the only pro-democracy party out there. That's what FDR called us. He used to say, the plutocrats say invest in the wealthiest people and let some of the wealth drip down on everybody else. But the democracy says invest in the working majority of the country and everybody will prosper together. So we are the democracy. And I tell that to my Republican colleagues when they can't correctly pronounce the name of our party. They call us the Democrat Party and that Democrat Congresswoman and so on. They don't know the difference between a noun and an adjective. So I've given up on them. I say, you've got a political speech impediment, and now I've got one too. Whenever I say the name of your party, I say the Banana Republican Party with that banana Republican member and that banana Republican bill. And we are the democracy.
Thank you so much, Congressman. And thank you, Diane, for your question. We'll move on to Eliza Fox from San Francisco, California. We're going to go ahead and request to unmute. Hi, Eliza.
Hi there. I would like to ask, what is the best strategy for bringing Trump to justice?
Well, if we're talking about Trump specifically, well, the best strategy, of course, was to win the presidential election. So we have a real Department of Justice, and we've done that. We've got a real Attorney General, and I'm somebody who's not freaking out about the pace of these prosecutions because they're actually moving very fast, and there are more than 700 prosecutions taking place, both in that third tier, the people who were involved in trespass and vandalism and destruction of federal property. The middle tier is now moving in terms of seditious conspiracy. You notice how my colleagues on the GOP side would get up and say, well, if there was a conspiracy, how come there are no charges? Well, they got their charges of sedition, which is levying war against the government, trying to overthrow the government. So undoubtedly, they'll move the ball again. They'll say, oh, well, if Trump was really behind it, how come he hasn't been charged with anything yet? Well, let's wait and see. Let's let independent law enforcement do their job. But, look, the guy's a walking crime wave, and he has committed crimes all over the country, including sexual harassment and assault on a lot of people. There's bank fraud, and there's real estate fraud, and there's tax fraud, and there are prosecutors all over the country looking at all that stuff. I don't want us to fetishize Donald Trump that much. He will meet his maker one place or other. There will be accountability and a reckoning with the law. I know it's maddening to people that he's like Richie Rich in the comic book who travels with his daddy's money and an army of lawyers wherever he goes. And I know it's maddening that he's been able to escape all the outrageous things he's done, including cheating so many carpenters and plumbers and painters and small business people out of their money. But there will be a reckoning there. But I don't want people to lose sight of the fact that Trumpism, right-wing authoritarianism, aligned with violent neo-fascist street movements, is going to be with us long after Donald Trump is gone. We got to deal with that movement. That is the threat to American democracy. I mean, he's just a con man. But if you look at the stuff that these people are saying about him, they understand that. They used him just like he used them. But they're strong now. And we've got to deal with domestic violent extremism, militarized white supremacy and white nationalism. And then we've got to deal with this attempt to destroy voting rights for our people. That's why I'm happy that today, and I bring you the good news, the House of Representatives passed the Freedom to Vote John R. Lewis Act to protect early voting, to protect weekend voting, to protect mail-in balloting, to start a national holiday for Election Day. We got to move forward. And, Tocqueville said that in America, democracy is always either expanding and growing or it's shriveling away. It's shrinking. And we've been in a contractionary shrinking mode with Donald Trump, with this war on democratic institutions, war on elections and the right to vote. We got to move forward. We need statehood for people in Washington. We need statehood for people in Puerto Rico. We need to move forward with a national election holiday. That's the future for us. John Dewey said that the only solution to the ills of democracy is more democracy. And what we've got here is a struggle between the Democratic movement, and don't ever forget it, we are the vast majority. Hillary beat him by 3 million votes. Biden beat him by 7.5 million votes. We're getting 4 or 5 million more votes than they are. in congressional elections, and they thrive only on the most anti-democratic political instruments within our system. The gerrymandering of our congressional and state legislative districts, the filibuster, which is not in the Constitution or even in federal law, the court packing and right-wing judicial activism, corporate dark money, which was handed to us by a right-wing Supreme Court. These are not things that are integral to democracy. They're antithetical to democracy. And so we need to do our best to resist them, oppose them, and defeat them so we can move democracy forward. Because like Tocqueville said, we're either moving forward with democracy and getting stronger, or we're moving backwards and we're hollowing it out.
Jamie, we've had some questions in the comments here asking about what happened in the Senate today with Senator Sinema, and I think a lot of people were a little bit dispirited by her comments. Do you have any just thoughts on, how we proceed in the Senate at this point?
Yeah, well, I mean, let's start just with the filibuster. It's not in the Constitution. In fact, it's completely antithetical to constitutional values. Every political institution, the House, the Senate, the Supreme Court, operates on majority rule unless it expressly departs from it. So if it's 2/3 to override a veto, if it's 2/3 to convict and impeach president, if it's 2/3 to ratify a treaty, it says so explicitly, but otherwise the assumption is 51 governs, or in the House, 218 governs, or in the Supreme Court, 5-4 does it. Could the Supreme Court just say, we're changing the rules, so now you need 7 votes in order to render a decision, or 8 votes? I mean, I might like that, but I don't think they could do that. And yet that's essentially what the Senate has done. In fact, it's even worse than that. It's not just that they've empowered 41 senators, they've empowered 1 senator. All 1 senator has to do right now is to put a hold on legislation, and the greatest deliberative body on earth becomes the least deliberative body, the most dysfunctional body on earth. So that's a very serious problem for us. And there's already radical disproportion built into the Senate. There's 50 Democrats there, 50 Republicans there, and the Democrats represent more than 40 million more Americans than the Republicans do because of the nature of where people are getting elected from. So when we talk about let's get statehood for the people who want statehood, who are left out, that's an historical imperative that we accomplish that.
All right, I think we have time for one more question. Manju, who we got?
Yes. Let's see if Deborah Rogers is available. Can we go ahead and request to unmute for our last question?
Wait, why are you saying just one more question? Because I've got 13 minutes to go, no?
We might be able to do a couple.
Okay.
Hi, I am unmuted, Congressman Raskin. I am a constituent and a fan from Bethesda, and actually a proud alum of Washington College of Law many years ago, before you were there.
Awesome.
But in any event, I follow with bated breath everything that's happening. And I think, a lot of us, so much was not public facing when the committee got underway. And it feels like things are only just sort of happening now, although I'm sure that's not the case. But it's frustrating as we see these requests for cooperation to go unheeded, and then subpoenas that aren't really being effectively enforced yet. And are there going to be new subpoenas? And really my worry is you will not have enough time to do what you need to do to get these people in front of the committee, to pursue subpoenas, to get the story out, and to hold these people accountable. And so I'm really curious about your thoughts on timing, and particularly with the pressure of the midterms coming.
Well, they're clearly trying to run out the clock, and we're very well aware of that strategy. The good news, Deborah, is that the vast majority of people we've wanted to talk to have wanted to talk to us. And we've spoken to more than 400 witnesses at this point. We have more than 50,000 documents in our possession. That was the most photographed, videotaped, audio taped violent insurrection in the history of humanity. So we've been able to put it together. I mean, you saw some of what we were able to do in just a few weeks at the Senate impeachment trial. But you're right, the closer we get to Donald Trump, the more friction and the more resistance we get from these people. And so that's Steve Bannon, and that's Michael Flynn, and Mark Meadows, who had 1 foot in and 1 foot out. He was kind of doing the hokey pokey there. We got a lot of stuff from him. And then Donald Trump got mad at him. And he actually didn't even get mad at him about cooperating with us. He got mad at him about his book, which Trump had given him a blurb for. But then somebody read it and told Trump what was in it and denounced it as fake news and made Mark Meadows denounce it as fake news. And he did. I mean, that's going to be the only case in the history of literature where someone denounced their own book as fake news. But in any event, it's a handful of people. It's true, they have a lot of information that we want and that we would like to get in order to connect all the dots. I wish the media would focus a little bit less on when is that subpoena coming out, and are you going to go in for criminal contempt now or civil contempt and all that, and focus on the fact that a former president of the United States, within a year of leaving office, is doing everything in his power to prevent the truth from coming out. If we could just get America to focus on that as a moral proposition, as an ethical proposition, that we have people who are trying to stop us from finding out what happened in an attack on the United States Congress and the peaceful transfer of power. I mean, it's just a remarkable thing. And I just feel like our moral and ethical defenses have been lowered so much by 4 years of Donald Trump that people don't even see what's going on. I mean, that's an extraordinary thing. And a whole political party that wraps itself around him and his continuing emphasis on a lie, the big lie. I mean, on January 6th, on the 1-year anniversary of this violent attack and this failed coup, he comes out and says again that the insurrection was on election day, and the insurrection day was the real day when the people were speaking. I mean, how outrageous is that? How scandalous is that? So I would like to see some moral revulsion about what they're doing, and we are going to do everything we can to subpoena all the information we need and to enforce our subpoenas. But even if we don't get every last person in there, we are going to have hearings that I believe will be compared to the Watergate hearings, because they are going to blow the roof off the house in terms of explaining to America what actually happened in the attack on our democracy. And I hope everybody will watch and everybody will discuss it. And then it will lead to a report that I hope, again, will be a game changer in terms of American history. And this is the most bipartisan committee I've ever been on, with a great Democratic chair, a great Republican vice chair. And what I see is constitutional patriots working every single day and every single evening to get the truth out to the American people before it's too late. And we are really aware of what you are, Deborah, which is the clock is ticking.
Thank you so much, Congressman. It looks like we have time for 2 more questions, so as long as they're short. So we're going to go.
Yeah, it looks like one more question. I've got to go on CNN. That's why they were getting me off, so forgive me.
Okay, we'll go to Iantha Tucker. I apologize if I mispronounced your name. We'll get them to request to unmute.
Okay. Oh, thank you so much. You saw me waving my hands. I have two questions, and I'll try to make them quick. The first one is, we feel that the Electoral College is what put Trump in the White House. We need to get rid of that. How do we get rid of it? The second one is the Congress people and the administrative folks from Trump's era who refuse to adhere to what the committee is asking. They should be arrested in contempt of Congress. They need to be put in jail so that they will be forced to do what they need to do and know that they should do. Okay, those are my 2 things.
You're a woman after my own heart. Iantha, am I saying your name right? The very first bill I introduced when I was a state senator in Annapolis, Maryland, was to get us out of the nightmare of the Electoral College. It was for a national popular vote interstate compact. We are more than halfway there under the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. I don't know that I've got time to explain the whole thing, but basically it's forming an interstate coalition among the states to say, we will cast our electors not for the winner in our state, but for the winner of the national popular vote. So we'll wait to see when all the votes are counted, whoever got the most popular votes, that's who we will vote for. the Electoral College is a nightmare at every level. It is totally anti-democratic. First of all, it's given us 5 national popular vote losers as president, including twice in this century alone. Secondly, it marginalizes the vast majority of the American people because the whole general election comes down to 6 or 7 swing states, and we know what they are: Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Florida. But the vast majority of American people don't live in those states, so you don't even have a real contest among them. But in 2020, we saw the way that the Electoral College, as you suggest, is an actual danger to democracy and a danger to the continuation of democracy and a danger to the American people. Because if you've got a bad faith strategic actor like Donald Trump involved in the campaign, he can turn every phase of the antiquated Electoral College process into a series of booby traps that will explode on us. So it's one thing if the parties agree that we will abide by the popular vote in each of the states. There's still huge structural problems there, but at least it can be peaceful, as we've seen. But they don't accept that anymore. They are a rule or ruin party. Either they're going to rule or they're going to ruin democracy for everybody else. So the Electoral College is just way too dangerous and obsolete an institution for us to hang on to it anymore. We got to get rid of it. And I agree with you. We have got to enforce our orders and our subpoenas. The Supreme Court has said Congress has all the same powers that a court has to enforce its orders. And, you know, it's a very tiny number of people in America. Unfortunately, it's Donald Trump and his friends who think that they can just blow off orders of the United States Congress. And when they were in Congress, people like Mark Meadows understood that that was absolute nonsense. And he and Jim Jordan were the first ones to insist that everybody must comply with an order, a subpoena from Congress. All right. I wish we could go on for another hour. I got to go on CNN. Love you, P-Trip. Thank you, Iantha. Thank you. Thank all of you for your questions. And hang tough, everybody. Hang tough for democracy.
Representative.
Thank you so much, Congressman. Before we go, I'm just going to read a couple questions, a couple chats that were out there. Catherine, I believe it's Cadillac, wrote, "Bought the book and look forward to starting it." Lisa Botwinick wrote, "I just bought the book, started reading it today." Diane Judum wrote, "Bought the book too and already started discussing it at our synagogue." And Marta Neves wrote, "I already got the book through my local bookstore," and also sent her condolences to the congressman for the loss of his son. So it's really great that so many people are buying the book. I hope it was very clear today for those who didn't already know, although I imagine most did, that you know, he's a national treasure. And Iantha and everybody else, thank you so much for your questions. I think we got the tip of the iceberg of his brilliance. And, you know, I think the questions themselves represented a community with a common set of values, are all fighting as bold progressives and earnest Americans together. So really thanks all of you for taking some time tonight to join. I do hope you have a chance to get his book. I believe we're putting the link in the chat. And one thing that's kind of exciting, we want to see how this one would go, but we are hoping to do more of these throughout the year to connect our members to writers, movie makers. I don't know if you've heard of this movie, Don't Look Up. Anybody hear of that? We might be doing something on that in the near future. One of our good friends helped inspire that movie. So check your inbox, and thank you so much, everybody. Manju, are we able to unmute everybody at the same time or no?
Let's see.
Is that a feature? Who knows?
Awesome.
I'm unmuted. Yay, thank you so
Thanks,
much.
everybody.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
We never got to say it.
It's excellent. Thank you. Questions?
And will the let me know when the TV next.
Now this is democracy.
Thanks so much.
Right.
Let's go.